So we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Community as a Verb, Mapping the Paths from Concepts to Collaboration. This is our mostly monthly webinar focused on all things identity and access management, brought to you by InCommon and Internet2. I'm Jody Tracy, Program Manager for Cohorts and Accelerators at the InCommon Academy, and I'll be your host for today. Just a few notes about logistics for today's webinar. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation using the Zoom Q&A function, so feel free to use that. You can find that button at the bottom of your Zoom window, and you don't have to wait until the end. You can put questions you have as they come up. So, and as you leave today's webinar, just a note that you'll be asked a couple of questions. We do appreciate your feedback, so we invite you just to take a moment or two at the end of today's session to do that. And today's session is being recorded. It will become available later this week. So if you registered for this IAM online, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording as well as the slides. And these materials will also be posted on the InCommon website and the IAM online YouTube channel. So be sure to watch for those links. And now, let's go ahead and begin for today. Community as a verb, mapping the paths from concepts to collaboration. We're here today for a conversation with community leaders about their lived experiences, unique perspectives, and the fabric of the InCommon community. So I will go ahead and turn things over to our moderator for this session, Grady Bailey, Senior IAM Architect at Internet2, to introduce us to our panelists.
Hi, everyone. As Jody just said, I'm Grady Bailey. I'm a senior IAM architect here at Internet2 and InCommon, and I have the pleasure of sort of facilitating this conversation today between some really fantastic InCommon community members. They also serve on the Basecamp Planning Committee, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves as we go here in just a second, but they are Claire Chance, Clay Cooper, and Kellen Murphy. Please do not try to say that 5 times fast. It will twist your tongue into oblivion. I tried it. So let's go ahead and start. Let's start with Claire. We'll go on the order of the image here. We'll start with Claire, Clay, and then Kellen. So tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you work, what you do, and kind of how'd you end up here?
Yeah, thanks. So excited to be here. My name is Claire Chance. I work at Colorado State University. I'm an IAM developer there. My primary, work is focused on Grouper, but I also support a lot of other applications within our IAM stack, using the InCommon TAP applications mostly. So Shibboleth and Midpoint. I've been there for almost 4 years now, but wasn't always in IT. I have a different background working in research compliance. So my education all started kind of in this sociology and nutrition realm, and then I was working in human subjects protections for quite a while. And at a certain point, I thought, yeah, I think I want to try to get into something a little bit different, and used my employee study privilege to get my master's in computer information systems. And kind of from there, have found my way into IAM. So kind of have maybe not a straight line path to where I am, but that's where I am now, and really enjoy it. So I'm happy to be here and be involved with the InCommon community.
Well, that's not quite a straight line path is going to be a pretty common theme as we go through here. So, Clay, why don't you tell us about yourself and your path here?
Sure. My name's Clay Cooper. I am a platform engineer. It's a fancy renaming of sysadmin here at Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. I'm in the IAM team. I handle the directories, the authentication. Spend a lot of time working with other groups who need SSO but don't know what else they need. I kind of landed here because I liked computers as a kid. I graduated high school, worked K-12 K-12 IT, which is a very different beast than higher ed. I went from there once I got my, Claire's talking about not quite being an IT person, through her schooling. I went to a public liberal arts college and got a Bachelor of Arts in computer science, so an arts degree from a liberal arts school, computer science, and now I'm working at a tech school that has a pretty big technical program. Worked with the state of New York system, a couple of roles there, including running a help desk at one of the schools, and then landed at RIT. I've been at this a few years. I got hired as a Solaris admin, and kind of took over the IAM stack from there, and worked on making sure that was up to date. And kind of as we went to hit that turbo button from we just need accounts to we need IAM, we need SSO, we need all of this other, all the other services that go around it. And that's how I landed here 25 years later.
So no shame in liberal arts degrees. I have my own Bachelor of Arts in linguistics with a minor in computer science. Funny enough, the combination of computer science and linguistics really coming in handy in this world of LLMs and AI and stuff. All right, and last but not least, Kellen, how about you give us a little introduction of yourself and how you ended up here?
Um, yeah, I might have one of the most circuitous paths towards identity. I actually have a PhD in astrophysics, and the way I ended up in identity management, sorry, I'm the identity an identity architect for the University of Virginia. Um, the way I got involved in identity and got here today is after I finished my PhD. I had two 1-year-olds and a mother-in-law that lived down the street who was willing to help with my twins, and also kind of a lack of jobs in science at the time. So I said, I'm going to start a company. And I started a consulting company. And then that consulting company got bought. And one day, the owner of that company said, Hey, have you heard of this thing called shibboleth? And right then was like the turning of an age in my life because I threw myself into this world. Having a PhD in physics means I'm good at solving hard problems and I like to think about hard problems. And I think identity and access management in higher ed has some of the hardest problems out there in IT. So that's what thrills me.
Kellen, I think shibboleth might be a gateway drug to IAM for a lot of people here.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's arcana, right? Don't
Yeah.
don't don't quote the old magic to me. I was there when it was written.
No. I see
But
Keith Hazelton on the call though, so maybe we don't want to.
it's
We're on the shoulders of others, always.
absolutely okay. So Clay, you doing me a great favor, building on the shoulders of others. And so now I want to talk about this community, right? So all of us, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we are all relative to some of those giants that we're standing on the shoulders of. We're all relatively new in this community, in the InCommon community, in this gathering here. So I want to ask each of you and talk over each other. We're not going to necessarily go in a circle anymore. We're done with introductions. But what brought you to this community, right? You all work at institutions that are InCommon participants, but just because you work at an institution that's an InCommon participant doesn't mean you're going to necessarily take part in this community. How'd you end up here, like now? Working on the base camp planning committee and all of that stuff. What drew you here?
I'll take that first, if that's okay.
Mhm.
So I before I was, at UVA, right? I was a consultant in that shibboleth space. And I had a really kind of interesting relationship with the Internet 2 community because it was like, oh, well, these are open source products and I'm trying to make money off of them. And that's kind of, but the thing that stood out is the activity of discourse and the level of conversations that happened around really, really hard topics. There was always interesting emails, particularly the Shibboleth users list and things like that. And so when I came to UVA and they said, "Hey, Kellen, we're doing this thing. It's called a collaboration success program." I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so excited. This is so fun. I get to actually like participate directly with these folks and I can get on the internet to Slack and ask questions and not feel like I'm cheating. I don't know, you know. So it was the CSP that sort of dragged me in, and that came with going to TechX, and I went to my first TechX, and I was like, oh well, I got to talk to these people more and do this every year. So that's how it's gone. But yeah, just the first little taste of getting in the community, and I was hooked. I guess we're using a lot of addiction references today, Clay, but that's how it was for me.
Yeah, my introductions to the community was obviously a little different than that. But my university had gone through the CSP and figuring out how to, take on new applications and learn towards the beginning. And then when I had joined, we had already had some things kind of pretty well established. But I also joined the team in the middle of a huge project where we were trying to move multiple system campuses into one identity management platform in Midpoint, and I was just learning from a fire hose, and my immediate team had done so much amazing pre-work that I was just really focused on like my small little CSU community here who was giving me everything I needed. And then once we got through that project, at that point, I got, assigned to be a lead of our grouper application, which was already up and running but didn't have a primary point person just because we had kind of shuffled things around. And all of a sudden, I was like, oh man, everybody knows a little bit and everybody's done some of the configuration, can answer some questions, but there was nobody that was like, this is my primary thing. And I realized I was like, I need to look broader. I need more feedback from people kind of outside my tiny circle here. And I think that's when I really started to engage with the InCommon Slack channels for sure, Grouper. I was shocked. I mean, almost every question that I ran into, I could look in there and find an answer. And if you ask someone, somebody answers. And it was really, really an amazing way to kind of step into a new role and to doing something new and finding all this expertise and support outside of like your smaller team. And it's incredible. It's like it never stops giving.
Yeah, I'd mentioned earlier I worked for the state of New York system, which is 60 some colleges. I mean, you know, New York's not big like Texas, but we have a lot of colleges and it's a very wide state. And they would do regional events for IT for each of the SUNY areas, so Western, Central, Eastern. And it was great. You had some camaraderie with, small 2, 3 IT people per college, and you'd get together and have that community. Once you end up in private, the community kind of fell away, right? And we're solving different problems, private versus a state system that's telling you what needs to happen. And that was something that we were missing. We were trying to do shibboleth, and how do we do shibboleth? This is really important to us now because we're sick of password prompts everywhere. This is now becoming more and more core to our university. And like Kellen said, there's the mailing list. There's only so much you can get from the mailing list. And yeah, we looked and go, oh, hey, InCommon does training. So I flew out to Milwaukee and did shibboleth training. It was great to chat in person with the other people who were doing the training there. Then certificates became more important. And so, hey, InCommon certificates, and the name InCommon kept popping up more and more. The webinars, started coming fast and furious every month. And it kind of just ended up being the place to go where you're looking for different perspectives. And the state system's interesting. Everybody kind of ends up with the same cookbook handed down from the Capitol. versus, InCommon, we've got hundreds of schools where we're all trying something different. We all have different requirements. We're an R2. There's an R1 that I would like to talk to. There's other levels. There's a lot of colleges in the area here, but having the colleges, the universities around the country, and with TechX and Basecamp, has really just kind of accelerated a lot of that. Just building our IAM infrastructure. I can call up Kellen and say, Kellen, what are you doing about guest accounts? And that's just been huge. Otherwise, we're paying for consultants, frankly, to come in and help us solve some of these problems if we can't figure them out ourselves.
Now, Kellen, you talked about getting to talk to people at not just on Slack, but at TechX and other things. So I do want to get a feel of what events has everyone actually attended. But before we get into that, so I do have it on good authority that Clay, at a TechX, I believe, you did play a very integral part in moving a table or something of the sort, right?
We did. Sometimes it's technical solutions, sometimes it's physical solutions. There's Grady standing with a tablet showing off a neat new tool to diagram out your IAM infrastructure. And one of my peers and I grabbed a table. We stole it from a back room somewhere at a hotel in Boston and said, "Here you go, Grady." So sometimes you do the technical lifting, and sometimes it's the physical lifting.
And I don't believe the statute of limitations have expired on that. So we now have it on record that Clay has.
In theory, this happened. There, I've covered it.
Plausible deniability.
Yeah.
So that's it. I mean, again, like hallway interactions, both of the deep introspective conversations and also stealing tables for your peers are a huge aspect of this community. Like being able to work together, but also just exist together and be able to have casual conversations because we're all like-minded in some way, right? Like that was a through line of all of your bios and intros is you care in some way. And I think that's deeply true of every single person in this community. So let's talk about a little bit what interactions have you had at community events, either in person or virtual? What have you attended? And what are some of those best interactions that you've had?
Going first. Yeah, go.
So, I kind of warmed up to this with some of the easy stuff, right? You sign up and you go to IAM online webinars and listen in, or you get on a mailing list, or, maybe silently join a Slack channel and that kind of thing. And it's really great to kind of have that interaction. And then after kind of going through that, I stepped it up a little bit and was able to go to TechX this past year. And just like you guys were talking about, casual conversations and the things just even outside of the sessions where you meet people, you understand why it is that they care about what they do and their hobbies and, how they all fit into their little niche environments. And then from there, you learn about how they have things set up and what their best practices have been and just how tight knit this community can be, and how welcoming it is at the same time. And so yeah, TechX I think is one of my favorite interactions so far, just kind of putting faces to all these names and getting to have those one-on-one, like in real life conversations with people. And from there, I think it was really easy for me to want to engage more, like participating in this base camp planning committee, which I reached out after TechX and said, hey, I want to be involved, and what are the kind of things that we can do, and looking at working groups and that kind of stuff. So I feel like there's an easy on-ramp to get to this point where you're really engaging in a more personal way, just from starting by logging into webinars like this. And I don't know. I see Clay and Kellen's faces all over things that they volunteer to help with, and there's obviously some big pillars in this community that have a lot of experience to share. So.
Yeah, and so I would like to talk about TechX because I think it's really interesting from my first TechX to my most recent, where that first TechX I was kind of like, yeah, I don't really know anybody. So it's like I'm gonna go to these sessions, I'm gonna listen in. You kind of see who's talking a lot, who's having the quiet conversations on the side. And then as you meet some people and you start talking to them more, that segues into things like at my first TechX, we met with the folks from the University of Michigan, and it was like, well, hey, we're both doing grouper stuff. Let's start a regular touch base. And so we went, and that segued into then when I proposed a grouper talk at my next TechX about telling UVA's story of getting rid of a legacy thing and going to grouper. It just meshed really well with Gail and Liam and Bruce's talk about grouper in its evolved state at Michigan. And so it kind of went from, oh, I'm new, I'm shy, I'm quiet. Oh, but this A camp thing is really cool. We all had conversations that were fun. To now at my last TechX, it's like the hallway track is the most important one. The hey Kellen, I want to talk to you. The grab the Clay going, hey, you know about Keycloak, right? Talk to me about Keycloak. Which is the guest thing he just mentioned. Two, that becomes the reason to like wander the halls rather than, oh, maybe I won't even go to that session because I got into a conversation with folks about grouper, and that led to us actually looking at code in the hallway. So I think it's such a welcoming community, and it feels more and more welcoming each year. And what I love about that is I've sort of become the find the folks that look like the deer in the headlights at TechX now and go up to them and say, "Hey, what's your name? I'm Kellen." And that's what people did for me. So I love it.
Two examples that don't require you to travel or pay or potentially break out of your shell. In the chat, put a hand raise if you remember LimeWire and the era of um, gosh, this is just this the era of acquiring copies of media, we'll call it.
So again, the statute of limitations,
Yeah,
Clay.
I realize there's a theme here. So you raise your hand or drop it in the chat. One of the big things with that type of community, you don't want to leach too much and you don't want to seed too much. So I've got an example of leaching and seeding there. I went to base camp first year. Base camp, one of the deer in the headlight, like Kellen mentioned, and we're talking about shibboleth. And somebody goes, "Hey, have you ever solved this problem?" I think it was password resets. We have password reset. Password expiration date was an LDAP, but we need to signal through shibboleth, "Hey, your password's going to expire." Because we know how good everybody is at not reading emails. We want to nag them during login. Have you solved this? I'm like, let's grab a campfire at the end, and we will, two or three of us can go through this and figure this out. What's your config? Compared configs, and it felt really great to give out that information, be able to help somebody else. Flip side of that, I was in a Duo Net Plus call for the Duo service, and Cisco was making some significant changes and not really giving us the data we needed, but it was available through their API. And as part of that conversation, kind of somebody quiet in the corner goes, I've got some scripts that'll just download and give you a full report that you need for that. And I'm like, thank you. That saved me days of work. Days that I can be helping with, maybe a password reset problem, a chronic password reset problem we have at our school. Right? I didn't have to spend it on backfilling a vendor's technology gap. So I think it's really cool. Like Didn't have to go anywhere. I just need to know, hey, this person has this. We have the same need. Let's let's meet you there because you know higher ed's kind of like libraries. Libraries like to give away books, um, and that just because we're in the IT and security, IEM and security areas, doesn't mean we can't freely also give out books, scripts, help, conversations,
Yeah,
best practices.
Clay, that again, you're doing me a huge favor. Leads right into to kind of what I want to talk about next. You're talking about like people actually sharing code. Like Kellen, you were talking about sharing code and sharing these scripts and recipes. And I mean, I I, I find that so, you know, it's perfect for this like the the world of higher education and research and again libraries and sharing like we are in pursuit of a common goal and we're all trying to solve some of the same problems in our respective institutions and the fact that people are just willing to like yeah here's my script ask me about it that's like it's always so cool to see that happen so I'm um Kellen, I know you were gonna say something and you can get to it, but I want to you know I'll start thinking about. I know I asked you before, you know, beforehand to think of a specific project that you had to come to the community for help with. And, you know, you don't each have to do it, but I want you to get a little bit more because I know we've been talking a lot about like sort of the touchy-feely, the vibes of the community, but like let's get down into to the technical weeds. Like what did you actually get help with? And or what did you help with? Like give us a real raw example of that. But Kellen, you can tack on whatever you were about to say before I jumped in.
Well, this might actually cover that just a little bit, right?
Great.
So the key thing that Clay just said that triggered me was library mentioning, right? So I, at last TechX, Mark Rank had a talk about a new working group, the Relying Party Discovery and Onboarding Working Group, which is all about making relying parties, service providers, um, sort of work with the Federation better. How can we lower the bar to the barrier, if you will, to learning about the Federation and wanting to be in the Federation? And as a part of that effort, um, I, as an IDP operator here from the University of Virginia, join this working group, and I see someone else with a virginia.edu, and it's Robin from our library who's also on the committee, right? And so like we are having internally this like, well, we've got all this stuff with the library, and now we want to how do they interact as relying with relying parties, but I'm the IDP operator, and our teams had never really talked before, like hardly at all. So it was kind of like the community facilitated internal conversations more and more. And that is solving problems. That is solving intra-organizational communication difficulty through this external thing. And I love it. So
Yeah, that's awesome. The our worlds are all smaller than we realize, I think sometimes how much they overlap. But the other thing I wanted to tack onto what Clay said earlier is, yeah, people will share code with you, but they'll also stop you from going down the wrong path. Like I've gotten plenty of feedback of, guess what? This doesn't work. Don't try that. And it's, that's best practices, but also like, hey, we put the work in and I can promise you that it's not gonna work the way you think it does. And that's incredibly valuable, on top of other than just getting a solution from somebody, which I think is also helpful. But I remember one of the first things that we really tackled that I felt like the community helped us so much with is transitioning from legacy provisioners to the updated provisioning framework in Grouper. If you've got a ton of old provisioners that someone else created and you're trying to figure out how everything was configured to start with and then transition that into the new framework, it was a little tedious. It took us some time to figure those things out. And we ran into plenty of blockers and found a lot of support through the community to help us get those upgraded. So if anyone is still looking at that, we've been there. But yeah, that was one of the biggest helps for us.
I like it's not a recommendation I've gotten from anybody, but it's more of a it's okay that you're still running Open LDAP. Like there's a lot of focus on Entra, Okta, whatever the hot new buzzword is. And that's an internal conflict. Like, are we behind because we're running Open LDAP? And you talk to other schools, and yeah, we're running Open LDAP too,
Mhm.
and it fits this purpose, and it's a perfectly legitimate, reason. Not just nobody forgot where the server was and they didn't know how to turn the power button off. It was here's a gap we have, and it's okay to have that piece of technology in your arsenal. If you can, if you have a use case for it, it's probably a great fit. And that doesn't have to be Open LDAP. It could be, Shibboleth, Simple SAML PHP, CAS. We've never really run CAS effectively here, but there are schools that are, living and thriving with CAS. The Catalyst partners will support you on CAS.
Well, yeah, and Clay, that's one of the things, not just this community, but higher education in general, right? The problems that we're solving look very different when you actually inspect them. They look very different than the problems in identity management in like private industry and like where when you have in private industry, like you become an employee and that's the first time they've seen you, and then you leave and you're gone. And if you become an employee again, you're brand new again. They don't hold on to that. But in higher education, you could be a student, you could then become an employee, you could then retire, and then you could come back as a retired employee, right? Like there are 1,000 different life cycle type scenarios in higher education, or the various grouping scenarios. That's why grouper exists. And like you said, everyone's run into the new hotness, which is totally valid, but there are still reasons to do things a certain way, and it doesn't mean you're behind. It means these problems are solved and it's a known solution. And just because someone comes along and says, I built a better mousetrap, I don't know, the one I have seems to be working pretty well. We don't have mice.
But speaking of, right, like
Speaking of mice,
with
is anybody else worried where
I
Kellen's
don't know.
going here?
Sorry. No, but like the community engagement, right? Like when you go into the group or Slack and you ask flat out, I'll call it, the first question I asked in that Slack channel was really dumb. Really dumb. And to his credit, Heiser stepped in and gave me a nice explanation, right? And now years later, it's at the point where it's like, I found a bug in the code. Here's the PR. Right? Like there's just been this nice ebb and flow from being a baby in the community, as I like to think of it, and stepping in and going, that makes sense, to Googling your error and seeing that 14 other people have had that pop and this is what it means, to being an active contributor and like stepping in and saying, answering questions, right? And that evolution, I think that happens with a lot of people that dip their toe in the community, and that's why it's so active. Where else can you go when you have a problem with a piece of software and get the lead developer to acknowledge it and go, yeah, no, this is a you problem, or no, this is an us problem, right? And that's just wonderful. And it's like that with all of the tap components.
Well, and I would hope even outside the tap components, right? Like
Yeah.
uh we've had and I know you've participated in them, Kellen, a number of conversations and thread meetups and things around using Entra. using Microsoft Intra. And that's like, we're not necessarily going to get there's not one lead developer of Intra to get on the line, but we can come together and figure out why this particular thing is not working well for our collective environments or something like that. And being able to collaborate on those solutions, and then, perhaps raise our collective voice and say, hey, Microsoft, or, hey, whoever, maybe this doesn't work particularly well for higher education. Could you look at this for us, please? And like, the community has had success in doing that for a number of different commercial products and solutions, like raising our collective voice and saying, I think this might be better, and there are a lot of us who are looking at this. So I want to go back because, Claire, earlier you said, and this was at the very beginning, talking about it having an on-ramp to the community, right? And I want to hear what each of you, for someone who is really just getting started. You're all on the Basecamp planning committee. We have Basecamp coming up, and the uh, the the Basecamp planning committee is responsible for putting together the program for that. So you all have insight into the sessions that are happening. You also have all done that and have, I'm sure, words of wisdom and advice for either people new coming to Basecamp or considering Basecamp. Give us thoughts both on Basecamp and the programming, as well as new people on ramping to the community. What sort of advice would you have for them?
Well, I mean, I think the easiest and most straightforward advice is just don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Basecamp, I think, is a great opportunity to do that, because we're really talking about fundamental concepts of IAM and kind of getting people in that same headspace about what it is that we care about and what we're talking about and how things interact. um, and are welcoming all those questions about why or how does this work, and wanting to get people kind of to this collective space, where we're all looking at it towards the same goal. So I think Basecamp is really meant to be open to anybody starting from any perspective, to say, hey, let's get you in here, let's show you where we are, and not to be afraid to speak up and participate. And we've, set it up in a way where people don't have to speak to a crowd of 300 people to ask a question. We've given you kind of safer spaces to ask those questions to people that you get to know, and to create like little micro communities during the training. And so I think that's really great, and take advantage of that, because those people are all thinking the same questions or have different or similar questions, and it's all about learning. So I'd say take advantage of it. It's a cool opportunity, and yeah, there's a bunch of sessions I'm excited, to listen to, and uh, yeah, Kellen has one of them for sure. So
Well, so Grady, I'm gonna push back on you a little bit because while Basecamp is sort of about these fundamentals, right, and it's intended for a new audience, I learn something new every single time. Like, this is my third year engaging with Basecamp in some way, and it's like I know I'm gonna take away some nugget. I'm gonna take away something. I'm I'm I am giving the lecture on access controls or whatever the talk, but somebody's gonna have a good question that I'm gonna take away and think about that, and that's gonna become a part of the next time I have to talk about that topic. Or somebody's going to have an idea in the zero trust section that's going to go, oh, I can take that framing to my leadership when they ask a similar question. And so it's Basecamp, I think, encapsulates the best of the community. You have people that really care about these topics and really care about bringing folks into the table. right? Sorry, I'm mixing metaphors to the table, right? We want to sort of give you a fun place to jump off of. And last year at TechX, there were folks that I met at Basecamp who came up to me and said, "Hey, remember me?" And it's like, "Yeah, let's chat. How did that thing go that you were working on?" And that, like, don't assume Basecamp is just for newbies, right? It's not. Um, that said, the thing about Basecamp I am wholeheartedly most excited for is Uncamp, which is taking the awesome unconference that is a camp, which is the last day of TechX, the last day and a half of TechX, right? And bringing it to this new audience. And what's great about Uncamp for those that aren't, or a camp that for those that aren't familiar, is you can pitch literally anything. You go up, you slap a note card on the board or post it. You have an idea, something you're confused about, something that you want to talk, you got a cool tool you want to show, right? My first TechX, when I saw, hey, like this is awesome. I'm comfortable enough to stand up and say, here's what I'm doing with Docker Swarm, and I did it, and it's like, oh, there are others that are interested in this, and we've found people that are using Docker Swarm that aren't swayed by the beauty of Kubernetes or whatever, right? And that's how you make connections. And now that we're bringing that this year to Basecamp, I think it's going to be fantastic. So
Yeah, I think unconferences, I'm obviously specifically a camp, and now hopefully uncamp as well. Well, not hopefully, definitely uncamp. Like it's going to be awesome. But unconferences are really the one of the best examples of that. Our title of our session today was community as a verb. Like it actually is like it is community in action because it's all participant driven. It is all community driven. Like we don't have an agenda to start. We are driving it from the bottom up, um, which is really really great. I'm also very excited for it.
so
Uh,
who is thinking about their A camp and uncamp questions? Are you guys? Because I am.
you
I have
would.
no shortage of topics, Kellen. No shortage of topics. Yeah, I'm definitely excited about the Uncamp. My first TechX, I didn't know what I was there for TechX, which I thought was the first 3 days, and then A Camp was the something different the last 2 days, and so my flight left Orlando with me on it. The next time I went to TechX, I stayed through the whole thing. It's like I really missed out on this the first time I went to TechX. So I'm really excited to this online flavor of it. Right, travel's not necessarily cheap. That doesn't mean we can't still have uh, community events like this.
So what this is now we're getting so I know we only have about 15 minutes left of our time here. I do want to open to anyone who may have a question or anything. Please feel free to put something in the chat or in the Q&A function. We are watching that, but we're gonna just keep talking because something that we haven't talked about yet. We've talked about all the great things that the community does, the way to get involved, how to get started, advice for newbies, all the cool things that you have experienced in the community. What are we missing out on? What's the thing that this community should be rallying around to solve? What's the problem that we need to be jumping on? Because there are so many that we have, right? Like there's so many problems that this community has come together and said, I mean, we'll go back to you know, just the evolution of SSO. Like researchers need to be able to work together across institutional boundaries. That's why the InCommon Federation exists. That's why Shibboleth exists, right? Like being able to collaborate and share resources and things like that. Like that's why these tools exist, is because we need to solve that problem. What are the things that you see that this community needs to solve?
Claire, you look like you're
Yeah,
going to start there. I didn't want to interrupt
I'm
you.
thinking.
All three of you are sitting there like, I don't know if I want to say it. Like I
Well,
can see it on every single one of your
yeah,
faces. You're like,
yeah.
I got something,
I'm
but I don't know if I
I'm
want to be the one.
I'm scanning the attendees list to see who's here. I just want to make sure I don't step on any toes. Um, yeah, I think it's we're technologists. The things we interact with are primarily the technology. Um, Something they don't tell you about IAM is you work with the people a lot too. Um, I think there's a gap that we all fall into where we're not focused on the requirements. We're focused on what can this tool do for me versus what do I need a tool to do for me. Um, and you'll go to a Threads meetup, and everybody's talking about Grouper. Like Claire keeps talking about Grouper, and I really want Grouper, but I'm like, do I want Grouper because I have a need for Grouper, or do I need to Grouper because I'm missing the checkbox that every other university has there? Um, I spent some time helping out InCommon. By the way, there's a lot of volunteer opportunities with InCommon. Just raise your hand and you'll get thrown into them. There was a program InCommon was working with some schools in New Jersey to build like a micro federation and get them kind of bootstrapped a bit. And one of the things we talked about a lot was like, what are your needs? What are your source systems? Because all of us are going to have a different mix of source systems and a different mix of relying parties slash service providers on the other side. We're all going to have a different budget. We're all going to have different constraints. Um, I talked about the New York State education system. All of them are state employees that are union employees. They're hired by the state and they get an HR field from that. Well, we're private. Our HR people are, I think that's our admissions building, two buildings over from there. My requirements are very different. I'm not going to install Grouper and set it up just because Claire's using it. I'm gonna assess what I need for my requirements. We're R2, we're private, we're non-union employees, and that flavors all of this. We have alumni from around the country because we don't do in-state, out-of-state tuition. Um, how do we right size with that? Kellen and I keep saying Keycloak. Keycloak may be a big piece of that because we have a need for guests. You may not have a need for guests. So how do we map our requirements through to a technology so that we're not just a service that exists, but we're a service that enables our university to make it through the next 10 years, and do that effectively.
Yeah, I love that. And it's really overlaps with kind of what I was thinking about. So, the way that we architect out systems, I know that there's work being done with IAM Sketch and how components fit together, but also almost taking it further to include the things that you're talking about, like the requirements, like what's the why, and then how do you portray kind of complicated workflows? How do you, put all those things together in kind of a broader picture of what you're doing and why, for what purpose, so that you can prioritize things better. Um, and if we do that kind of as a community, do we have more of a common understanding about how those things fit together or how you can compare different institutions in their stacks, and why they have them set up certain ways, I think would be a great thing to have in place.
And we're not going to get like we're not going to get those answers from InCommon. InCommon's not there to be the oracle to
Right,
tell us how to do it. InCommon is there for to enable the community to provide those spaces,
right,
the frameworks for that.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to go in a slightly different direction because I think fundamentally identity is changing. And I've been in this field now for about 10 years, and I've definitely seen that. And we need to think more and more about identity in this community as being a part of the security community. Because really we don't identity, people will say identity is the new perimeter and buzzwords almost like that. But what does that really mean, right? And so as a community, the problem that we face there, I think, is bridging the gap from this community that we have to the other communities out there, the people that are thinking primarily about cybersecurity, the people that are thinking primarily about networking, right? Those communities, we need to have more feelers into and bring them into the fold, if you will. And what stands out for me is at TechX, right? At TechX, you will see these different tracks, right? And there's an IAM track, and there's a cybersecurity track, and there's a, you know, cloud track, but all of these things are really overlapping, and they're going to overlap more as we start talking about things like zero trust, right? If you want to talk about always verifying, you need to be able to sit down with your network engineering team and have a real discussion about how are you verifying the identity of this thing for this user at this time in this way, right? And we can talk until the cows come home. I almost mixed another metaphor there, but I didn't. We can talk
The
until
Ohio slipping out there, Kellen.
it is about SAML and authentication. But what happens to the stuff on the wire when that person who authenticated has their session hijacked? And that's where this crosses into the network engineering, into the security, and we're all deploying SaaS apps more and more and more. We were just talking internally about how our form for requesting a new SAML integration sort of is predicated almost in a way on you are spinning up a server and installing Shibboleth SP, but that's not how it works anymore.
Oh.
It's just not, right? We go out and we acquire a contract with Zoom or some other solution that's a big SaaS thing. We have Canvas, and Canvas has a giant cybersecurity incident. What are we doing about that? Are we talking about what are the federation implications of things like that? What is it about this new model of the threats are at the identity layer, but the cross section where those threats matter is way more broad than it used to be? So that's the kind of conversation I'm going to TechX and I'm looking to have, right? I'm going to go to you, Clay, and I'm saying, how'd you guys handle Canvas? Right? I'm going to go to you, Claire, and say, what happened? Right? Or maybe Laura in the case. But still, right? That's where I'm looking for. How is this community going to change as we continue into this zero trust era?
The nice thing about that is because it's a community and because it's something that you're participating in, it's not change that's going to happen to you. It's change you're going to drive, right? I mean, everyone, all of you sitting here and everyone sitting in the participants list and everyone else, on Slack, attending Basecamp, attending TechX, has a voice in how those things, how the community changes. So okay, with only about 5 minutes left, I want to leave it. Do any of you have anything that we didn't touch on, that you really, really, really wanted us to talk about, or any pearls of wisdom, with the knowledge that we need to leave just a tiny bit for Jody to take us out at the end?
What I will say is don't be afraid. When I went to my first TechX and I first started dabbling in this community, I was super kind of afraid to ping somebody and ask a question, right? And so I will leave this audience with this, which is if you want to ping me, ping me. Join the Internet 2 Slack. I'm there. I respond to messages at all hours of the day. And I want you to feel like there's at least someone out there who you ping me with a dumb question, you ping me with a good question. We don't care. We care about this community. We don't judge, right? We just want to share it because I guarantee you might think you have a dumb question or something. You don't want to ask Kellen that, but Kellen is probably going to get into a conversation with you and learn something at some point. I have learned stuff from everyone in this call. I will share that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Everybody's here to help. I think all of us are here because we don't care about making shareholder. We're not out to make shareholder value go up, right? That's not what we're here for. We're here to share the knowledge, and you gotta if you're somebody who's a bit introverted, like ask somebody about what they're working on, and you'll see the light come on. You'll see them just engage. Like if you're afraid to ask that dumb question, get out there and go, hey, what are you working on? Kellen, tell me about what you're solving with KeyCloak, because I think it's a great idea. And that
We're gonna end
causes
up
people to
talking
light up.
about.
They're proud. We're proud of what we work on. Everybody should be proud of what they're working on, and open to share it.
We're
There's
gonna
no
end up
share.
doing a
There's no
segment, I think.
stakeholder value we have to worry about here.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, just jumping in and even being a part of like this planning committee and getting to know you all better. You've all gotten more questions for me since then, and it's really nice to be able to have that the get to that comfort level where you can just ping Clay or send Kellen a message or whatever because we have resources all around us. This community is full of them, and just like Kellen was saying, you can really learn something from absolutely anyone, no matter what part of like their IAM journey they're on. So yeah, I agree. It's a welcome place.
I think that is probably as good of a place as any for us to wrap up. Thank you, Kellen, Claire, and Clay for all of your insights. Jody, you have some words to wrap our session today?
Always. So thank you for joining us today. Always glad to have you all in the room with us and being part of the community. Um, Speaking of base camp, it is coming up here in a couple of weeks. We're working on that. Some really exciting changes we alluded to today, like the unconference, and we had a camp counselors training yesterday. I'm so excited to have this experience. So I hope you can join us for base camp the first week of June. There is a buy one get one deal, so bring a friend. And just want to thank everyone on behalf of all of us here. Thank our panelists for sharing their time and their expertise. It is always great to see all of you